I am joined today by Melissa Sassi, Chief Penguin for IBM Z. She's the head of the IBM Hyper Protect Accelerator. She's also the head of the Student Entrepreneur Experience at IBM. She also happens to be on the board of directors at TACMEL, which I'm looking forward to hearing more about, and the founder of MentorNations. She's a dynamic speaker with an amazing story that I've heard, and I just am so grateful for you to join me today, Melissa.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciated it appreciated it when I got your note that mentioned that you'd like to have me on the show. So thank you.
So for those who haven't met you and heard your story or heard anything about you at all, tell us where you're from, who you are, and what you do.
Yeah, sure. So again, I'm Melissa Sassi. I am IBM Z's Chief Penguin, which a lot of people often ask me then, okay, what does that mean? And how do I get a fancy job title like that? Who wants a boring job title anyway? We have enough boring things that we do in life. So I thought I would spice things up a bit. I head up student and entrepreneur experience at IBM within our IBM Z division, which is our, if you think about, well, that big bad mainframe thing. And yes, it's still around, and yes, it's still relevant, and yes, COBOL is still relevant. I'd be happy to talk about that in a lot of detail, but that's my gig at IBM. I also head up our IBM Hyper Protect Accelerator. So what does all that mean? I have an opportunity to work with early stage startups, so less than $1 million in revenue, less than 5 years old, companies that are dealing in sensitive data, so personally identifiable information like medical records, bank statements or financial services statements, insurance records, that sort of thing, the kind of stuff that you really want a company to protect to the furthest extent possible. Through my program, we provide up to $120,000 in cloud credits that get used over a 1-year period. And obviously I work at IBM, so that means IBM's cloud. We provide 1 year of business mentorship, which is all about investment readiness, company's value proposition, their pitch, their product market fit, all of that kind of stuff. Again, the things that would help a company to build and scale. And then 2 years of technical mentorship. So for companies that have never built on the IBM cloud and have been with AWS or whatever cloud company is out there, we help them to get onboarded into our cloud and utilize a product that's called IBM Cloud Hyper Protect Services, which is all about data protection, privacy, and security. It's not the only product they have access to. Obviously, IBM has Watson and blockchain and all kinds of cool stuff in addition to Watson Health. So it's how do you not just, come in and be a cloud vendor, but how do you really come in and be a true business partner to, grow together? And, many of our startups, one of the big things that they like is not only is it about, how do we help them build and scale, but how do they gain access to the IBM network? So that's one half of my job. The other part is empowering and inspiring students to learn technical skills, to get prepared for the future of work, and to move into new and exciting jobs in tech. And I'm not saying everybody's going to be an engineer or everybody's going to be a data scientist, but I have this fundamental belief that everyone, should understand the basic building blocks of computer science or what it means to code. And I try to get them excited about it enough where they want to make that their core career. And ideally, come in and learn some IBM Z skills along with it. I run a number of different, kind of platforms for learning. One of them is called the IBM Z Global Student Hub, where students have an opportunity to come in and be part of events that prepare them for the future of work. I do a number of different live streams. There's a lot of content there, and it's really informal way of students. And I use students broadly because I believe we're all lifelong learners. And anyone looking to transition their career, or even someone who is kind of fresh out of high school, or even maybe 16 years old and wants to explore, some different learning journeys. How do we empower them with insights around, well, what does it mean to be an application developer? What are those skills? What is that journey that you need to follow along? And also enabling students to have free access to that material should they decide that they want to switch their career over, or hey, maybe college is not for me.
Interesting. All right, well, I'm going to back up just a little bit, because Chief Penguin, you said, so how did you get them? How did you convince people to let you
Yeah.
sign the title?
So, I came from Microsoft. Before I joined IBM, I worked at Microsoft for 5 years. My last job at Microsoft was as an impact investor, where I built, not with my own hands, through partners, internet and energy access solutions around the world, and then brought digital skills to the newly connected. When I came to IBM, my role was all about creating this new startup program, because that startup program that I created, it's brand new. So I not only created my own job title, but I also created my own job 2 times over since joining IBM. And that's something I had an opportunity to do at Microsoft as well, was create my own job in a sense. There was a job requisition out there, but I was part of the founding team, and I was a volunteer with that team before I joined. And when I was at Microsoft, I met this amazing woman, Donna Sucker, as well as kind of recognizing that she had, in a sense, called herself the chief ninja cat of Microsoft. And I had this FOMO thing going on of like, oh, I want to be like some kind of animal title that sounds fun. And then I saw that there was this guy who has this Twitter handle who works at Microsoft called Thready the T-Rex. And I thought, okay, we've got this T-Rex, we've got this ninja cat, and I'm like a program manager, like there's just like, like night and day. I'm like, oh, I want to be part of this. And I was working in a team that was probably more kind of like public policy, kind of focused, if you will. And wasn't necessarily the right fit in that role. I would have stuck out like a sore thumb. I already stuck out like a sore thumb, but I thought, yeah, not the right time. When I came to IBM, it just so happens that I was in Karachi, Pakistan, and I met this woman named Jihan Ara. And Jihan was part of creating this incubator called the Nest IO, funded by Google. And if you think about it, the Nest, like what animal comes and hangs out in a nest? The big bird, of course. So Jihan was the big bird. And I thought, oh my gosh, wait a second. We've got a big bird, we got a ninja cat, we got a T-Rex. And like, what do I have? And I thought, what is that animal that I could be? And I looked at, IBM's strong focus on open source technology. And I thought about, the penguin being this kind of symbol of open source and Linux and all of this. So I thought, oh, okay, I can be a penguin. And so then I kind of borrowed from Donna's title, not to compete, but to, not to compete or compare, but how do we elevate one another, in the world of tech, and also give ourselves some fun job titles while we're at it. So I became the chief penguin. I changed it in my, in LinkedIn and Twitter just for fun. And then I ended up learning how I could actually change it in the corporate directory at IBM. And so I did that. And if you are an IBM employee and you have access to our kind of employee directory, same thing with Slack, it has, Chief Penguin. So I did it for fun, and then it kind of caught on to the extent that the UN wrote an article about a hackathon that I led right as the kind of pandemic was coming on, and people were starting to realize, okay, this is the thing, and schools are starting to close. We ran this hackathon called Code the Curve, and when the UN wrote this article, it landed on the front page of or the homepage of UN News, which is like, a news center for diplomats and ambassadors and different people who are working in the broader UN umbrella. And they included a quote for me alongside the Secretary General of UNESCO, or the Director General, or whatever the right terminology in the UNESCO world is, essentially the CEO of UNESCO, whatever the right term is. And they called me IBMZ's Chief Penguin. And I thought, hey, if it's in my corporate directory, it's on the homepage of UN News, like that's it. I am absolutely the Chief Penguin. So that's where it came about.
That's pretty amazing. I mean, and it is relevant. You're right, with the open source community, the Linux community, and then the work you're doing, right? You're trying to bring people into use IBM's platforms and leverage the IBM technology, and that's pretty amazing. I mean,
yeah, it was a lot of fun, and I've been really thankful, but it's kind of a blessing and a curse, because my job is my life's work. I have my own nonprofit, as you mentioned, which is called MentorNations, and we taught tens of thousands of young people to code in 12 countries. We have a co-working space, a robotics lab, and an IoT lab in Tunis, Tunisia. So for those of you who are not familiar with Tunis, it's sandwiched in between Algeria and Libya. And it really kind of was something that I originally stumbled upon, in terms of a career opportunity by accident. I had become inspired by my kids who lacked access to technology in their classroom. And I thought, wow, what can I do? How can I, change their preparation when it comes to preparing for the future of work,
Mhm.
and how can I help empower their community? And I set it on this mission to bring laptops into my kids' classroom. My children live in Tunisia, which we can talk about that whole story in a bit if you'd like. But when I recognized that my kids didn't have access to tech, I thought initially, oh, they just need devices in the classroom. That's kind of how I saw it. It was very simplistic. Like, they don't have a computer in the classroom to learn Word, and so why don't we get computers into that classroom? What I stumbled upon, and many people before me had stumbled upon this first. I'm not the first one to realize, well, it's not just access to a physical device, it's not just access to the internet, it's skills. I ended up sending 400 laptops to 20 schools across the country of Tunisia, funded by Microsoft and HP. And as they were landing, I started to think about, how do they get implemented? How does this technology get implemented, and how do teachers bring it into the classroom? And ended up taking a trip around the country for a few weeks. Ended up being able to get some time off of work to do that. And I went around teaching young people to code. Had a bunch of engineers who came with me, or almost engineers. They were in university. And I realized that we weren't just solving something that was impactful for these, 26 governments in the country. It was really, something that is impacting the entire world, not just, the continent of Africa, not just the, Middle East and Africa, but really the world. That kind of led to the creation of a company. It led to, me serving on a board with Takmil, which is all about empowering out of school youth around Pakistan with skills.
Mm.
And a lot of the other things that I do within kind of the broader, tech ecosystem. And hey, now my passion and my purpose is incorporated into my job, good or bad, because sometimes it's a little bit hard to think about what is that divide between, work and play.
Mm-hmm. It sounds interesting. So, I mean, I've heard your story about your children, but go ahead and share a bit about that. I mean, because I think that some of that is, that's why you started the.
That's exactly right. So my children and I are victims of parental kidnapping. It's something, obviously, like, how do you even say that? How do you even get that out of your mouth? It's everyone's worst nightmare. It's kind of ranks up there with divorce and death and all of these awful things that we would consider as our worst nightmare. And what once was a worst nightmare became my reality, our reality. I'm thankful that we remained in contact. We're very close. We just FaceTime together yesterday. So I know where they are, but I didn't actually ever have the ability to bring them out of Tunisia and bring them back home for a variety of reasons. And once they got old enough to have a voice, they said, why don't you just wait until we're old enough to finish school? That way, we close out our school and don't have, a situation where we're moving from one country to the next in the middle of the school year. Hard decision to make, in terms of, how do I make the decision now? Because my kids say, let's wait till I get out of school. That you don't continue to, fight, if you will, to bring them back. I taught myself how to speak Tunisian Arabic. I opened up a company in their country, and really spent a lot of time thinking about, how do I not just be a mother from afar, but how do I improve the livelihood of young people in their country. And it ended up becoming something bigger than just their country. It became something bigger than just us. It also became something, I think, for me, that allowed me to compartmentalize what I was going through in my life, and enable me to have something to put my energy toward, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine you're a mom and you're doing mom things, and then all of a sudden all that's changed and gone and you're in a quiet house. No matter how much you work, that gap can't be filled in, or no matter how many friends you have or how many like hobbies you have, it again gave me like something else to kind of put my energy towards, so it wouldn't be used toward things that might be self-destructive or things that
Mhm.
might not have been the healthiest for me or others around me.
Wow. And it's inspiring that you took a negative and have turned it into a positive, not just for your kids, but for a lot of kids, and for even the work you do at IBM, right? That whole passion, you can tell it's
That's where it all
seems through
comes
everything.
from, really is something deeply personal. And I often say that it is about taking my worst nightmare and turning it into my superpower, of like, how do you take this bad, awful thing and turn it into something positive? And I didn't set out to do that. It wasn't part of my plan. It just kind of happened until it happened. And then it was kind of like, it gave me an opportunity to reflect on why I was doing what I was doing and how it was helping me to heal. And I think in many ways it helped them to heal as well. I mean, they know they were kidnapped, they know what happened to them, but we've all just kind of been like, okay, it's the reality of our lives. And so, you move on and you accept what's happened and you make the best out of a very, awful situation.
True. So let's rerun the clock a little bit more then, and let's talk about what caused you to even get into the IT career field at all. I mean, what was that? Your education choices or something else
No, I'm
inspired you?
not. Funny enough, I'm not an engineer. I couldn't code my way out of a cardboard box. I can do a mean hour of code from code.org, that's for sure. And I've developed this expertise around being able to, be involved in deeply technical activities and projects and enablement, without being the one who rolls up her sleeves and codes. One of my life regrets is not learning to code, or incorporating that into my, educational background, whether that's formal or informal. And I'm not saying that I want to go out and be an engineer tomorrow, because not everybody is meant to be an engineer. There are different skill sets and experiences that we all have, and we're not all going to be good at at everything that we come across. But I kind of stumbled upon tech, and I was working in a very different field. I actually used to work in marketing operations, funny
Mm.
enough, and I was working on I worked in mainly kind of looking at the marketing supply chain and helping to operationalize, marketing and advertising expenses. So like completely different
That
than
is
where I
different.
am right now. But I always felt like a little bit fish out of water, and, wasn't sure like what I wanted to do when I grew up. And when I ended up getting a job at Microsoft, again, not even though I got a job in tech, I wasn't necessarily doing anything deeply technical, it was marketing.
Right.
Um, but in that particular role, I had an opportunity to work on the Empowering Us All campaign, from Microsoft. If you think about what led to the mission of empowering every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more, there was a lot of work that went into telling really impactful, empowering stories about people who are using technology to make the world a better place or to
Mm.
create societal change. And I was looking around and I was seeing all these amazing people doing these amazing things. And I felt like I was on the fringes of it. I felt like I was working on the engine that enabled us to talk about that stuff. And I felt like I needed to be closer to doing some of those things myself, but I didn't quite know what that thing was. And I took on a couple of stints within the Microsoft for Africa team, which is all about employee volunteerism and giving forward on the continent of Africa. And I realized that I had a lot of unhidden talents, or hidden talents, I should say, that they became unhidden over time, where I realized that sometimes when you're working with startups and students, you may not think you're an expert in this or that, but hey, when you're working with someone who might be a student, you're an expert in a whole lot of things you didn't realize you were an expert in.
Right.
And it kind of started there, and it, really inspired me to think about how did I want to get more involved in education, in the startup ecosystem, in, developer advocacy. And I felt like I could never be a developer advocate because I'm not a developer. I had this very, I don't know, imposter syndrome series of moments in my career where I felt like I don't know how I can ever go and do some of these things. And I think, with my work through MentorNations and my last role at Microsoft, I was able to develop a lot of those skills that were lacking, but I really did a lot of it through volunteerism until I came into, the realm of being able to talk about my volunteer activities just as strongly as I had about my like kind of paid career,
Mm-hmm.
if you will. Um, and so that's how I kind of transitioned from being in marketing into more of like a technical, technically facing role. Again, I'm not out there building applications. I'm not guiding technical enablement, but I have engineers on my team and I manage engineers.
Right. I mean, I think that's an interesting factor that people don't normally think about with IT, right? There's a broad range of capabilities in IT careers, from marketing to sales to the people who try to get the contracts, write proposals to the
Yeah, it takes
engineers,
all
right?
skill sets. You have legal, you have
Yeah.
HR. I think in a big tech company, you can find many of those things. And I was doing something that wasn't related necessarily, but it was part of the engine until I became part of the engine.
Right. And you end up picking up, you don't realize how much you pick up by living in those environments where you're living and breathing
Yeah.
the what the company does. And then you're able to then say, oh, okay, I know how you need to do this. This is X, Y, and
Yeah.
Z. Even though I can't build it for you, I know what you need to do.
I was on a call just like that today where we're, building a new mobile application that will also have a web component to it that will be in combination or in conjunction with code.org. So thinking about, a mean hour of code, I'm in the process now of building hour of Z. So speaking of IBM Z, and I'm part of managing the team of engineers who are going to go out and build the thing. The developers who are going to go out and create it. And it's really taught me a lot about how, you don't necessarily need to know the intricacies of every single thing that you come across in life, whether that's personal or professional or whatever. We have all these interchangeable skill sets that are needed regardless of where you're working in tech. But I have this fundamental belief, and it's not just me, that every company nowadays is a tech company. You cannot get by as a company without having some component of technology associated with whatever you're doing, whether you're creating a product or service.
That's so true. So you've been in IT for a bit.
Yeah.
Um, and you've seen how our career works and how we interact. What's something that if somebody came to you and said, Chief Penguin Melissa, today you get the magic wand, the power to make a change in our industry, what's something that you might change?
I think that young people need to be exposed to computer science at a much earlier age. And I think there also needs to be new pathways into teaching tech.
Hmm.
I think that there's often this really complex and cumbersome language around what does it mean to study computer science. For me, for example, I always thought, and this is why I didn't go into computer science, it's not for you. You're a girl, boys do that.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of how my young mind translated things. Like, they don't look like you, they're not the same gender as you, they don't have the same interests as you. And I feel like there needs to be a much earlier age that young people are taught computer science, and just different entryways into learning about computer science. I also believe that there are many different pathways into tech, that it doesn't necessarily mean because you're going to become a programmer or whatever it is, you're a developer, that you necessarily need this 4-year college degree. I think that there are many other interesting pathways, including informal education and being self-taught, that it's really about you coming in and being hired based on your skills, and not, don't get me wrong, I'm working on my PhD now, so
Right.
I am a fan of formal education, but I think it's not something that is a path for everyone.
Well, it should also not be an impediment, right? For somebody to get a career. Interestingly, I've mentioned you, my daughter is not interested in going the college route. She wants to jump right in, but she's the first to tell me in her IT program at her high school, there's 2 girls.
Yep,
still.
that's exactly right. And it's a big, wicked challenge that impacts, impacts you at a very early age, and I'm convinced that some of these things happen even at the age of 4.
Yeah. Well, that's a really good, that's a really good challenge that we do need to undertake if we want to continue to, get more people involved, and we need more people involved. We need the different creative minds from different perspectives to be able to meet all the
Exactly.
challenges.
Exactly.
So Melissa, where do you see yourself in the future? Where are you headed, either with IBM or with some of the other work you're doing, or this advocacy work you're doing? Where are we headed?
Yeah, so I've got, at least for my program at IBM, I'm looking to bring another 55 startups into my IBM Hyper Protect Accelerator. I've got 45 startups in the program now, so I'm calling this year my Road to 100. So by the end of this year, that is kind of my my short-term goal, from a entrepreneur experience perspective. From a student experience perspective, I'm looking to bring 5,000 students into my IBM Z Global Student Hub platform. That's free, it's virtual, it's self-paced, inspiring students to come in and actually guest blog, take part in events, win prizes, all that kind of stuff. So those are just some short-term goals when it comes to the broader, IBM world. We'll see what happens after after this year. My goal is to hit those goals, and then, let's see where things go. I think that I'm still open to ideas around, what does that next job entail, or do I continue to expand my empire? We'll see. From a nonprofit perspective, my role at MentorNations, there's some interesting grant opportunities on the horizon. I'm looking to, kind of bring more economic opportunity not only into the country of Tunisia, but around the world. When it comes to digital skill building, I'm looking to finish up my PhD, which I have. I'm very close to finishing. I've been saying that for a hell of a long time. That's okay, because it's a marathon, is what I'm told, not a sprint. And a good dissertation is a done dissertation.
Right.
So I've handed in my dissertation, waiting to hear back, and should hopefully finish that up soon. I, have some goals of mine around, creating a platform, an ed tech platform that I haven't had an opportunity to build, because you all know I can't code my way out of a cardboard box, so you don't want me building it. And then really thinking about, where do I take my chair position with the IEEE, so the largest engineering organization on the planet with 400,000 members worldwide. Where do I take that chair position? We created the first world standard for what it means to be digitally literate. That's been endorsed by the IEEE and their standards board. I'm looking to take my EdTech platform, combine that work together, and actually create something that can be used either in or outside of the platform to bring that framework to life.
Wow, that's amazing, and looking forward to it. And we'll make sure
Write
to
a
put
book, teach,
yeah.
I'm on another Road to 100, which is my Road to 100 countries. So that's part of it too.
Fun. Well, we'll make sure to put links in the description for the programs that you're promoting, so we can hopefully get the word out there. And just
that sounds great.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Melissa. This has been fantastic.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. All right, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.